Ichigo Kurasaki's growth has always been entertaining to watch. Not only is it our introduction to the world of Bleach and Shinigami, but his journey is a satisfying one. So, today, we'll be looking at each of his forms in chronological order. Substitute Shinigami. Everyone starts small. Originally, Ichigo served as a temporary replacement for Rukia. He achieved the powers of a Shinigami by having her powers transferred to him. She planned to only give him half of her spiritual energy, but Ichigo absorbed all of it. From there, he transforms into a Shinigami, complete with signature black robes and a Zanpakuto named Zangetsu. For some background, Zanpakuto are weapons used by Shinigami. They appear as swords in their sealed state and have two unlocked versions, Shikai and Bankai, which we'll get into soon. Anyhow, in Ichigo's case, his sealed sword is big. Granted, it only manifests this way because of Ichigo, since he couldn't properly control his spiritual energy yet. So, his massive, unfocused energy produced a weak but large weapon. Fun fact, it looks like a mixture of Rukia and Isshin's Zanpakutos. Unfortunately, this beginning state isn't very powerful, seeing as his Zanpakuto can easily be broken. According to Urahara, it carries a Zanpakuto's shape, but none of the necessary internal strength. Either way, it does prove to be useful for Ichigo. Like other Shinigami, he is able to defeat Hollows, which is interesting considering he was fighting with a sealed Zanpakuto. Speaking of, let's dive into Ichigo achieving both Bankai and Shikai. Shikai and early Bankai. Ichigo's Shikai is first seen during his training with Urahara. After having his Zanpakuto practically destroyed, Ichigo summons its true form. The man in a dark, mysterious cloak just happens to be the first one he meets. After seeing Zangetsu, Ichigo called out to it. This allowed him to manifest his Shikai. It's similar to Zangetsu's sealed state, but with some differences. It lacks both a hilt and a guard, unlike Zangetsu's original state. In place of those is a simple handle wrapped in a white cloth. It has a high degree of utility, considering Ichigo can use his Zanpakuto like a flail, while the cloth can also be used to treat wounds. That being said, the blade itself is huge and wide, as well as black with a silver edge. Due to its width alone, Zangetsu can be used to block attacks. Though its most interesting feature is what happens after Ichigo achieves Shikai. But before that, be sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications on to never miss an upload, and smash that like button for some plot armor today. One of Ichigo's mentors, Yoruichi Shihoyin, explains to him that his Zanpakuto is always in its Shikai form. She also tells him about one of the most important aspects of a Shinigami skill set, Bankai Release. It's the final form of a Zanpakuto, and it can typically take years to master. However, Ichigo was able to unlock his Bankai in only 3 days' time, all thanks to Urahara's training technique. Now, let's discuss what Ichigo's early Bankai can do. Known as Tensa Zangetsu, it drastically changes his Zanpakuto's shape. Besides that, the weapon develops a proper guard and hilt, though it does lack the signature bandages of the Shikai. Instead, it has a broken chain at the end of its hilt. Ichigo's Bankai also transforms his ordinary Shinigami robes into a sleek black coat with red lining. The tail ends of the cloak are ripped and ragged, similar to Zangetsu's clothing. Besides those features, Tensa Zangetsu is rather durable. It's certainly an upgrade from his original form as a substitute Shinigami. Plus, this Bankai is a stepping stone to more intricate forms. While on that topic, let's get into a more polished form next. Hollowfied. Once again, this state is only possible due to Urahara's training. Encroachment is the process of a soul losing its chain of fate. For context, the chain is what binds a body to its soul, and destroying it will cause a soul to become a hollow. Urahara frames it as, if you have not returned. As a Soul Reaper, then we'll have no choice, Ichigo. We'll have to kill you. So, this training technique is to literally survive or be killed. Though Urahara's teachings isn't meant for just training, it's brutal, but has a defined purpose. Encroachment serves as a means for the process to bring out Ichigo's inner hollow. Truthfully, one would assume this turns him into one of the visored, but that would be wrong. In reality, Ichigo manifests hollow-like powers in a mask due to his Quincy mother, Masaki. Her near-death experience with a hollow left hollow spiritual energy within her that was then passed onto her son. Despite being born with a raw affinity for it, Ichigo still had to master this hollow form. It was critical. Otherwise, the hollow part of Zangetsu could take over his body. But with that explanation out of the way, let's take a look at its abilities and appearance. His mask has two distinct looks, with both iterations having a white skull as the base. The first version has 3 red stripes along its left side, which can go up to having 10 stripes. But his second mask is less dramatic in that aspect. The 2 crimson lines go diagonally down his eyes, which add to his menacing look. Besides its appearance, Ichigo could only summon the mask for 4 seconds. However, with enough training, he's eventually able to summon it for almost 3 times that, 11 seconds. Ichigo's original hollow form also provides several benefits, like improving his Getsuga Tenshou technique. Though, this isn't the only time Getsuga Tenshou is augmented. Later on, we'll discuss Ichigo's final Getsuga Tenshou. Ichigo's own abilities increase dramatically, such as his speed, durability, and even spiritual pressure. While experiencing it, Dordoni Alessandro del Soccaccio exclaims, "That's more like it! What's powerful spiritual pressure?" Ichigo's Reiatsu can even be compared to that of a full hollows. While on that topic, Ichigo has another hollow transformation that is not only monstrous, but extremely powerful. Vasto Lorde. After a devastating blow from Ulquiorra's cipher, Ichigo's hollow side fully manifests. While this is the only time it appears, it does leave a lasting impression on fans. For the second time, Ichigo is possessed by Zangetsu, but his appearance is extremely different than before. In this Vasto Lorde form, Ichigo has long hair that reaches past his shoulders. In addition to this, he keeps his hollow whole, except it's smaller and black markings wrap around it and his shoulders. Instead of his usual skin color, Ichigo's skin tone turns pure white, while on his wrists, ankles, and neck are patches of red fur. All of this combined gives Ichigo an animalistic look, which his mask adds onto as well. Said mask engulfs his entire head with bold markings that match the ones on his chest. Though, the most interesting aspect of its design is the mask's giant horns. They resemble a bull's, but more twisted and inward like a ram. Unfortunately, this Vasto Lorde transformation seems to make Ichigo almost mindless, which is reflected in his animalistic appearance. In this state, he goes as far as completely ignoring Ulquiorra's questions. While in this form, Ichigo also gains several different abilities. Like in Arrancar, Ichigo can release a powerful Ceroblast from his horns that can destroy buildings. If one horn is cut off, the blast will prematurely explode. As if the Cero ability isn't enough, this form also increases Ichigo's spiritual power. In fact, it was felt by others who were far from the bottom of the Hueco Mundo Valley. Besides that, he can easily summon his Zanpakuto with just his open palm, and his sword arm is stronger too. With a single slash, Ichigo was able to demolish an entire portion of the Las Noches landscape. His speed is another attribute that increases as well. The Vasto Lorde form is quick enough that Ulquiorra notices. That wasn't a flash step just now. It was a sonido. The Arrancar is right, of course. Instead of utilizing a Shunpo, Ichigo's full hollow form uses Sonido, which is the hollow equivalent of that. Although Ichigo's Sonido is so much faster that he cuts off Ulquiorra's arm before the Arrancar can even react. While on the topic of Arrancar abilities, this form can literally dispel Lanza del Relámpago. This is rather significant because that happens to be Ulquiorra's most powerful technique. Plus, Ichigo's able to achieve that feat without injury to himself. Lastly, Vasto Lorde can regenerate Ichigo's own body. For example, after Ulquiorra breaks Ichigo's mask, a burst of energy instantly heals the hole in the Shinigami's chest, and he also regains control of his body. This hollow-esque form is no match for the next, which is almost equally as destructive and risky. Final Getsuga Tenshou. To finally beat the menace that is Aizen, Ichigo relies on his ultimate trump card. FGT is an ability that stems from Ichigo's Bankai. To reach this elevated state, Ichigo had to fight the Hollowfied Tensa Zangetsu within his inner world. The fight goes on until Ichigo is stabbed by Zangetsu. And because Ichigo accepted his Zanpakuto, he learned the final form of Getsuga Tenshou. Sadly, Tensa didn't want Ichigo to unlock this knowledge. He wanted to protect Ichigo from it instead. Tensa feared for the Shinigami's safety. Regardless, he does prove to be the key that unlocks FGT. Back in the real world, fighting against Aizen, Ichigo transformed. This state looks similar to Vasto Lorde, but there are some differences. Ichigo still has the long hair, but it's now black. His eyes turn crimson, and a gray bandage is wrapped around his face and body. However, the most interesting aspect is the spiritual pressure his body lets off that takes the form of a pitch-black smoke. Yet, most of it is centered around his right arm. But let's talk about the abilities now. By fusing with Getsuga, Ichigo gained a dramatic increase in power. Unfortunately, it does come at a cost. In Ichigo's own words, "Using this technique means I lose all my Soul Reaper powers." This startling revelation is what makes FGT so significant. Defeating Aizen also meant losing a key part of Ichigo's self. At this point, he had been a Shinigami for a year, but losing that privilege is a worthy trade-off to stop Aizen. Speaking of, Aizen is immediately threatened by it, since he sees it as a form that is beyond his own, more powerful than he could ever be. Aizen is at his peak during this fight, so it's an interesting statement. Right after activating FGT, Ichigo unleashes the true power of this ultimate technique. Mugetsu, the essence of FGT, forms via Ichigo's sword hand. He manifests entirely black spiritual pressure. Then, he swings it. It's so powerful that it creates an immense wave of pressure. This massive output of an attack can even affect the sky and destroy anything in its wake. It's powerful enough that Aizen has to regenerate to a previous state. As previously stated, Ichigo unfortunately loses his Shinigami powers. In fact, they dissipate almost immediately after using this last resort of a form. Thankfully, he has another one that is more concrete, and something we get to see more than once. Fullbring. For context, a Fullbringer is born from children whose parents were attacked by Hollows. This results in the mother retaining bits of the Hollow's powers, which are then passed down to their offspring. Kugo Ginjo describes it as, "Our power is more of a Hollow than a Soul Reaper." Fullbringers can use this to manipulate an object's characteristics or movement. And they only have this ability because objects, even small ones, possess a soul. Using their Fullbring power, they can accomplish magnificent feats like walking on water. However, they are different from other spiritual beings due to their physiology. Their ability is connected to their physical bodies, so they have to build their endurance and strength to higher levels. This is why Ichigo's training with Bakugo was so intensive. Originally, Ichigo trained his Fullbring power to defeat Shukuro Tsukishima. Normally, he'd simply use his Shinigami power, but he can't. Therefore, Ichigo has to get creative. But don't worry, we'll get back into Shinigami Ichigo later. Despite lacking his original power, Ichigo's Fullbring is still impressive. He first began using this power to change his substitute Shinigami badge. The power itself is activated through emotion, more specifically the pride he felt as a Shinigami. The badge takes the shape as his sword guard, but with black spiritual pressure seeping from it. It is only reactive to Ichigo though. Without his touch, the guard won't appear. While it isn't used for offense initially, it is important for defense, seeing as Ichigo uses it as a shield. This rudimentary fortification is just the beginning though. Eventually, Ichigo is able to set off energy blasts with his empowered badge. He compares the intense feeling of it to using Getsuga Tenshou, despite Ichigo knowing his Fullbring abilities were incomplete. After more training, Ichigo further develops this new power. Instead of spiritual pressure only covering his Shinigami badge, it envelops his entire body, and it takes the form of his previous Shinigami robes. That isn't all either. A blade of spiritual pressure covers his arm, and it looks amazing. This serves both offensive and defensive utility, which creates a nice middle ground. It offers offensive capabilities and does give some insight into his power. After gaining this form, Ichigo learns it's more similar to his previous abilities than he thought. Chad realizes it first, but Ichigo's Fullbring is a clad type. This is because his body is cloaked in the spiritual pressure of his Fullbring. In Chad's own words, wearing his power is his true form. Now, why is this similar to his Shinigami powers? As previously stated, his Bankai changes his physical appearance, specifically his robes, and as mentioned, the Fullbring does the same thing. However, this Fullbring is still not the final version. Through more extensive training with other execution members, Ichigo is able to manifest a complete Fullbring. The former Shinigami then uses this newfound power in a battle against Tsukishima. While it still requires his badge for activation, it is his most powerful form prior to his rebuilt Zanpakuto. For starters, the spiritual pressure encases Ichigo's entire body. White armor forms with a black bodysuit underneath. It's a slick, modern design in comparison to his other garb. This form has a striking appearance, but the most interesting aspect is his badge. It changes into a guard for his sword. The blade itself is straight, but not as thin as his Zanpakuto. His Fullbring also manifests a stronger Getsuga Tenshou. Unfortunately, it still isn't as powerful as his Shinigami powers. That said, Ichigo's speed and power are augmented. He easily overwhelmed Tsukishima with them. In fact, Ichigo's Fullbring is so fast that he rips off Tsukishima's arm before the man even notices what happened. Ichigo also benefits from boosted strength, and he was able to kick Tsukishima hard enough to send him into a building. Plus, his Fullbring is durable enough to withstand Chad's complete Brazo Derecha de Gigante with minimal damage. Despite Chad using such a powerful ability, Ichigo takes the entire attack as if it's nothing. Unfortunately, Ichigo ends up losing the Fullbring to Kugo. This does allow him to regain his Shinigami powers, but there is leftover Fullbring in him. The residual power influences both Zangetsu and his Bankai. While on the topic, his Shikai and Bankai become completely different after his first bout with Yuhavach. Rebuilt. Yugrum Hushvalt easily cuts Tensa Zangetsu in half. This stuns Ichigo and forces him to train in order to defeat the father of the Quincy, Yuhavach. Bettering himself for the battle is an extensive process too. First, he is met by the Royal Guard, who will help him rebuild his Bankai. He recuperates in a hot spring, eats good food, but the biggest obstacle is reforging his damaged power. As Mayuri Kurotsuchi explained, A Bankai that is destroyed can never be returned to what it once was. So ultimately, it's a challenge to build it from the ground up, which is where Royal Guard member Uetsu Nimaya comes in, the original creator of the Zanpakuto. More importantly, he's significant in helping Ichigo to reform his Bankai. This character and many other of Kubo's designs are really some of my favorites. His first attempt to reforge Tensa Zangetsu isn't done alone, since Renji Aburai joins Ichigo. Together, they each fight the Asauchi, which are unnamed Zanpakuto. The Zanpakuto themselves are composed of these Asauchi, which in turn imprint on the user's soul. Unfortunately, Ichigo is sent back to the human realm after 3 days of unsuccessfully fighting the Asauchi. Though all isn't lost. Ichigo's father explains his son's origins and gives shocking information about his mother. As it turns out, Ichigo is partly Quincy due to his mom. An important fact considering his Quincy side influences his Shinigami powers. She only died to Grand Fisher because she lost her Quincy powers to Yuhavak. Armed with this new information, Ichigo then returns to Soul Society. Instead of fighting the Asauchi, Ichigo finds one suitable to his hollow side. It even resembles Ichigo, except with a more creepy skeletal appearance. Nimaya is impressed and tells Ichigo, "I'll personally restrike it for you." With the help of his rather quirky bodyguards, Nimaya begins to reforge Ichigo's Bankai. While doing this, Nimaya gives Ichigo another revelation. The reason this Asauchi so easily accepted Ichigo is due to the latter's hollow side. As Nimaya puts it, this hollow is your Zanpakuto. Not only that, but the spirit Ichigo believed to be Zangetsu is an imposter. The cloaked man in his inner world isn't his Shinigami powers. Rather, it is the manifestation of his Quincy side. He also learns that this mysterious man isn't just a random Quincy being. He resembles a young Yuhavak from 1,000 years ago. Right after, Ichigo meets with the Quincy Zangetsu in his inner world. There, his Quincy side explains that he didn't want Ichigo to become a Shinigami, nor did he save Ichigo during his fight against Ulquiorra. That was thanks to his hollow side. Now, why didn't the Quincy form of Zangetsu reject Ichigo becoming a Shinigami? The answer is rather simple. He feared that eventually he'd have to kill Ichigo himself. Thankfully, that isn't the case now. In fact, it's the opposite. Before Zangetsu fades away, he tells Ichigo how proud he is of the Shinigami. Despite the suffering he experienced, Ichigo came out stronger for it. He even tells Ichigo, "I almost feel joy in stepping away." Sadly, the Quincy Zangetsu does fade away. In his place is his true Zangetsu, a power he can call his own. After learning both are inherent to his power, Ichigo has a startling revelation. Instead of possessing one Zanpakuto, he has two. One resembles his previous Zanpakuto, while the other is more of a short sword, both having their own sources. The long sword represents his hollow side, while the short blade is reminiscent of his Quincy. Now, with the introduction of their recreation out of the way, let's get down to abilities. It's very similar to his previous Bankai and Shikai, except Ichigo can combine the swords into one. His Getsuga Tenshou is also more powerful and allows him to enter a unified hollow state. During this time, Ichigo's blade turns white. His merged form is similar to his holification since his speed, strength, and spiritual power are once again enhanced. For example, he was able to stop Yuhavak's sword before the other could anticipate it. Ichigo also devastated part of a building with a single strike. Rebuilt Zangetsu's most useful ability may be the fact that he can combine both a Sero and his Getsuga Tenshou. This powerful attack is enough to even wound Yuhavak, who was empowered by the Soul King. Though, that does take us to Ichigo's final and most powerful form. Pure. Fearing how strong he's become, Yuhavak immediately tries to destroy Ichigo's Bankai. But it doesn't break right away. Instead, it is simply cracked. Ichigo is still able to wield it. In fact, he cuts Yhwach in half with a Getsuga Tenshou. Unfortunately, this doesn't kill him, and Ichigo must get help from an unlikely source. With Aizen's help, Ichigo surpasses the father of Quincy. However, Ichigo's rebuilt Bankai is seen as almost too strong, and Yhwach tries to destroy it. Due to its reinforced build, the Zanpakuto doesn't fall apart, but crumbles away. A new blade arises in its place, one that matches Ichigo's Shikai. It's surprising that it doesn't immediately break like last time, but this may be due to Ichigo finally accepting his Shinigami and Quincy powers. It's a big revelation, considering Yhwach had completely destroyed Zangetsu before, and Yhwach broke it, as mentioned, due to being threatened by its power. Though that doesn't stop the Shinigami. Ichigo is still able to use the new blade to defeat the Quincy King. Here, Ichigo's win is instrumental in stopping Yhwach and restoring the Soul Society. Without him, it's doubtful anyone else could have accomplished that. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our video. I'm sure we all can't wait to see some of these forms animated. Which one are you looking forward to most? Let us know in the comments below. I'm Anthony Fan, and I'll catch you next time.